Hello, everyone. How are you? Today's breaking news. We're now talking politics more than ever before. Every Monday, Tom Bradby dials Washington to get the latest analysis of Donald Trump's era-changing orders with Washington correspondent Dan Rivers in D.C. and a range of informed U.S. experts and insiders. On Wednesday, our esteemed political editor Robert Peston and deputy political editor Anushka Asthana joined Tom to bring you the insider knowledge and key talking points from Westminster. And every Friday, Tom, Robert, and Anushka are answering our viewer and listener questions in our special Q&A episode. Got a question for the team? Email talkingpolitics@iten.co.uk. You can hear Talking Politics wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and watch every episode on YouTube. Hit subscribe on any of those platforms to ensure you never miss an episode. As a challenging background to Rachel Reeves' spring statement next week, the OECD yesterday highlighted the UK government as one of 4 developed countries facing significant and painful increases in debt costs over the next 2 years, as a consequence of having to refinance large stocks of maturing debt at significantly higher interest rate. It talks about the UK's heightened vulnerability because that maturing debt is equivalent in value to more than 15% of GDP. The increased cost of refinancing this debt would be more than 0.4% of GDP, which as an increment is significantly more than the entire reduced overseas development budget. Read the OECD's analysis below. The rise in interest payments from debt refinancing in the coming years will differ depending on the share of fixed-rate debt maturing relative to GDP and the gap between prevailing market rates and rates on maturing debt. For countries, France, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States face heightened vulnerability, with the debt maturing by 2027 exceeding 15% of their current GDP and the average yield to maturity on debt issued in 2024 surpassing that of this maturing debt by over 1.5 percentage points. For these countries, debt refinancing is expected to increase interest payments by roughly 0.4 percentage points of GDP by 2027. In other OECD countries, the average increase is projected to remain below 0.2 percentage points of GDP. The government says it wants to make significant savings on welfare payments to the disabled and help the disabled into work. The point, say all ministers led by Sir Keir Starmer, is not to harm the disabled, but to free them from a life of dependency. That, they claim, is why this is a truly labor reform and not just brutal cuts engineered by Rachel Reeves because she needs billions in savings so as not to breach arbitrary, self-imposed fiscal rules on the assessment date of March 26. Is any of this plausible? The first thing to say is the point of fiscal rules should be to help focus minds in government about how best to share scarce resources between different important services. They should not set hard deadlines for making decisions with potentially profound consequences for the lives of millions of people. We've already seen an example of the political dangers of trying to rush through changes to personal independence payments, PIP, and the health-related elements of universal credit, because one element that was particularly upsetting to Labour MPs has already been dropped, namely a 1-year freeze on PIP payments. But as my colleague Anushka Asthana has been exclusively disclosing for the last 10 days, this was only one part of the welfare reform package. The other elements were to restrict entitlement to personal independence payments, while cutting the health-related universal credit payments and recycling those UC savings into an increase in the standard rate of UC. You can see in this the simple story, and perhaps simplistic story about welfare payments to the disabled that the government believes and is trying to tell. First, that hundreds of thousands of people receive cash to help with their living and mobility costs, but don't deserve it. Second, that the structure of UC payments provides too great an incentive to disabled people to sign themselves off work to get the health-related benefits top-up. Starmer will doubtless take comfort from the fact that, according to polling by the Good Growth Foundation, 60% believe the system provides too much support to people who don't want to work, and 39% think that it's too easy for people to get benefits who don't need them. But popular belief does not make it true. And, before going further into the nitty-gritty, it is worth doing a quick economic reality check. It is a fact that the proportion of British people in employment has fallen since COVID and, unlike many other rich economies, has not recovered to 2019 levels. But the proportion of British people who are working remains high by international standards. According to the OECD, in the third quarter of 2023, the UK ranked fifth in the world, with an employment rate of 74.9%, well ahead of the US, for example, and behind only Iceland, the Netherlands, Japan, and Germany. Even if it is a laudable ambition to encourage more people into work, the UK's is not an economy whose failure is that too few people are working. The grotesque failure of the British economy is hardly a mystery. It is that living standards for those in work have barely increased for more than 15 years, and too many of those in work receive too little to pay even for food, energy, and other essentials. Pretty much every competitor country whose employment rate has recovered to pre-COVID levels has higher productivity and higher wages than the UK, which might tell you that Britain's problem is not that its benefit system is skew-off, but that it's the labor market itself that is broken, that remunerated toil in Britain delivers inadequate incentives.